திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். புழியர்கோன் வெப்பொழித்த புகழியர்கோன் கடல் போற்றி. ஆழிமிசை கல்மிதப்பில் அணைந்த பிரான் அடி போற்றி. வாழி திரு நாவலூர் வன்றொண்டர் பதம் போற்றி. ஊழிமலி திருவோத உரர் திருத்தாள் போற்றி. திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். So we have been discussing 7.13 in Padhigam, and in that Padhigam we are discussing currently the story of thirugnAna sambandar. And last time we had met, we had discussed the events in Madurai, his debates with giants and thirugnAna sambandar establishing Sivam in Madurai. We have seen up to that point. So we are continuing from there. So thirugnAna sambandar had been in Madurai for some time, right? Because if you remember, thirugnAna sambandar's parents live in Sirgari, and thirugnAna sambandar with his entourage, he has been going around pilgrimage. And so Sambandar had come to Madurai, and he must have been there for it must have been several months at least before his father had seen him. So his father got the message that thirugnAna sambandar is in Madurai, and he had defeated the giants in his debates, and he has re-established Saivam in Madurai and all that. So he heard it through the normal way in which people hear messages in those days. So his father, Sivapada Hridayar, he wants to see his son. So he makes his way from Sirgari, which is near Chidambaram. He goes to Madurai. So Chidambaram to Sirgari to Madurai will be about something like 300 kilometers. So he makes the trip, and it must have taken him quite a while to cover the distance. And he comes to Madurai, and then he comes to the place where thirugnAna sambandar is staying. So as soon as he entered that place, the other devotees with Sambandar, they meet him, welcome him, and then they go inside and tell thirugnAna sambandar that his father is here. So thirugnAna sambandar comes out. Then thirugnAna sambandar's father falls at Sambandar's feet, and then Sambandar falls at his father's feet, and then they chat, and then his father is so happy that his son is safe, and he has established Saivam in Madurai and all that. And thirugnAna sambandar asks him, when you are meeting your parents or your family after many months, you will typically inquire it, how is so and so, how is so and so, and are they well, what's the news, that kind of thing, right? In that kind of a sense, thirugnAna sambandar asks his father, are my parents well? The parents he refers to is divine father and divine mother, Siva and Parvati of Sirgari. He's saying, my father and my mother who gave me the milk of knowledge and made me their devotee when I was at a young age, how are they? So he sings a very wonderful padhigam called Mannil Nallavannam Vaalalam. That's the beginning of the padhigam. It's 3.24. And in that padhigam, he says a very important message, that those who are always having Shiva and Parvati in their heart, they will have wonderful life on this earth. They will have nothing, that they will lack nothing. That kind of a wonderful padhigam he sings. So in fact, that padhigam 3.24, Mannil Nallavannam, is something that many Saiva families sing during the weddings, because it's a very auspicious padhigam. Because in every song he says, Shiva and Parvati together, they are dwelling in Sirgari, and those who think of them, they will lack nothing in their life. That kind of a padhigam. Anyway, so then the father returns back to Sirgari, and then Sambandar spends some more time in Pandya country, and then he returns to Chora kingdom. And he comes to Chora kingdom, and he comes to a place called Tirukkollamboodur. and it's in the Kaveri Delta area, and that Kaveri, any delta area, the Kaveri comes and branches off into many rivers and then reaches the sea. So one of the branch rivers, right, is called the Mulliyar, and that time there was this, the monsoon time, so the Kaveri was in the floods. So the Mulliyar was having high flowing, fast flowing flood waters, and the Sambandar was on one side of the river, and the Kollambudur temple is on the other side of the river. And you have to take a boat and cross the river. And at that time, because of the flood period, the boatmen had all tied their boats to trees and other things, and they have gone. Nobody was there. So only the boats were there, and the Kaveri was in floods. The Mulliyar was in floods. So Sambandar was eager to go worship Siva and Kollambudur temple on the other side of the river. So he told his devotees to untie one of those boats. So he and some devotees got onto the boat, and then he sang one padhigam, Kottame Kamarum. That's the beginning of the padhigam. He sings a padhigam, and in that padhigam he sings, Shiva, please take this boat to the other side. And then with Shiva's grace, the boat automatically crosses the river and takes him to the other side of the river. Now there is no boatsman, nobody is, putting oars and rowing the boat or anything. So the Shiva's grace takes the boat across the river, and Sambandar goes to the other side of the river and reaches Kollambudur temple and worships Shiva there. And then he comes to thirugnAna. thirugnAna, I think I may have mentioned it earlier. It's a famous temple near Karaikal, and as today that's a temple where Shani, the Saturn, worshipped Shiva. So people who are doing this pariharams and navagraha pariharams, they all make a beeline to thirugnAna and do archana to Shani Sannidhi there. Of course, the main thing is that the Shiva was worshipped by Shani there. That is the important thing. And so he comes to that temple because, if you recall, last time when we discussed, when the Jains wanted the second challenge, right? The first challenge was curing the king of the fever. The second challenge was, let's put our holy work in the fire and see which one survives the fire. That second challenge, the challenge by fire, Sambandar had randomly taken out one padhigam from his bundle, and that padhigam happened to be the padhigam of thirugnAna. He had been to thirugnAna before and sung a padhigam there, and that padhigam manuscript was what came to his hand in Madurai, and that's what he put in the fire. So he wanted to come back to thirugnAna and worship Shiva there. So he comes to thirugnAna and worships Shiva, sings another padhigam, and then he goes back on his pilgrimage tour. And then he wanted to meet Thirunavukarasar. If you remember, they were together. Thirunavukarasar and thirugnAna Sambandar were together at Vedaranyam when the messengers from Madurai came and invited Sambandar to come to Madurai. So you can imagine that probably about maybe 6 months have gone by now, at least. So he comes back to Chola kingdom now, and he wants to meet Thirunavukarasar. So he inquires and he learns that Thirunavukarasar was in a place called Tirupundurthi. Tirupundurthi is about 10 kilometers from Thanjavur. Everybody would have heard of Thanjavur because of the Brihadishwara temple. That temple was not there in Sambandar's time. That temple was built about 3 centuries or 3.5 centuries after Sambandar's time. So he comes to Tirupundurthi is where Thirunavukarasar was staying at the time. So Sambandar comes to Tirupundurthi to meet Thirunavukarasar. And as you know, Sambandar goes in his palanquin everywhere. So the devotees, his entourage, the devotees are carrying the palanquin, and Sambandar is coming in the palanquin. They reach near Tirupundurthi, and as they entered the Tirupundurthi area, he stopped the palanquin and put his head out and asked, where is Thirunavukarasar's place? Where is he? Where is his, where is Thirunavukarasar staying? And then he says that he hears a voice from the people carrying the palanquin. I am here, sir. And then he looks around, and then he finds that Thirunavukarasar was carrying the palanquin. So he jumps out of the palanquin and falls at Thirunavukarasar's feet and says, Swami, how can you do this? Appare, how can you do this? Oh, Father, how can you do this? No, it is not right that you carry my palanquin. That is the greatness of Thirunavukarasar. He felt so humble, and he felt Sambandar was so great that he wanted to carry the palanquin. And it's Shiva's wish. Everybody, Sambandar's entourage, they know Thirunavukarasar. But Shiva's grace made Thirunavukarasar be unrecognizable by the rest of the devotees, that he was able to mingle and carry the palanquin for some time. So thirugnAna Sambandar goes to Thirunavukarasar and stays in the place where Thirunavukarasar is staying. And then they have, as you can imagine, Sambandar was explaining all the things that happened in Madurai, and Thirunavukarasar was so happy to hear all of them. And then, having heard all this, Thirunavukarasar wanted to go see Madurai and other sthalams in Pandiyanadu. So then, after spending some time together, Thirunavukarasar decides to go south to Madurai and Pandya kingdom. thirugnAna Sambandar goes to other temples and goes on his other pilgrim tour. So then, Sambandar returns back to Sirgari and spends some time in Sirgari. And then he wanted to go to the sthalams that are north of Sirgari. Remember, he had been to the sthalams in the south for the last 1 year or more than 1 year period, right, before this. So Sambandar wants to go visit sthalams that are in the northern part of Tamil-speaking region. So then he comes to, the Tiruvannamalai, Kanchipuram, that area. And he comes to a place called Tiruvottur. And Tiruvottur, as he came to that sthalam, a Shiva devotee comes to him, falls at his feet and says, Swami, you must tell me what I should do. I am being ridiculed by all the Jains and Buddhists. So Sambandar asked him what happened, what is the reason why they are ridiculing you. Then he says, Swami, I have this huge farm of palm trees, and all these palm trees are all male trees. And so the Jains are mocking me, saying that you are a Shiva devotee and see what Shiva is doing for you. As you know, the palm trees, there are some trees are male and some trees are female. That is a very interesting thing in the plant kingdom. There are some trees where this kind of male-female difference exists. So palm is one of those things where there are male trees and there are female trees, and only the female trees will bear fruit. Male trees, they just flower and they don't have any fruit. So Sambandar heard this thing, and it was very unusual, right? When you have 100 trees, by nature, naturally, some will be female and some will be male. But if you had a farm of 100 trees and all the 100 are male trees, what is the likelihood, but that's what happened. So Sambandar heard this, and he looks at those trees, and then he starts singing a padhigam. He sings a padhigam is 1.54. Poottherndayana kondu nin ponnadi etadar illai. And that padhigam he sings, and as soon as he sang, let's say, half the padhigam or most of the padhigam, immediately at that instant all the palm trees started bearing fruit. You know how long it takes to bear fruit, right? It will come as a tender thing, and then it will become bigger, and then it will ripen, and you know all that, right? How long it takes? Several weeks, maybe a month. But in this case, because it was Shiva's grace, all those palm trees at that instant bore fruit. And you can imagine the impact that it would have had on all the people who had gathered there. All these 100, whatever is the number of trees that he had in his farm, that had never had fruit for the last so many years, and suddenly, in front of their eyes, they bear fruit. So all the devotees are wonderstruck. They are so happy, thrilled, and the giants who were there, who were mocking this devotee before, they all fall at his feet and beg forgiveness for their folly, and then they become Shiva devotees. And then Sambandar goes on to other temples. He visits Kanchipuram. Then he comes to Kalahasti. And in Kalahasti, he sings several padhigams. And in one of those padhigams, one of those songs, he describes the great service that Kannappa did in Kalahasti. And then from Kalahasti, he doesn't go beyond, because I think in those days, Kalahasti was probably the border. Tirupati, Kalahasti, that belt was the border of Tamil-speaking region. And beyond that, probably there are difficult terrain, and then beyond that, people don't speak Tamil, right? The other languages come in. So what Sambandar does is that from the Kalahasti point itself, he mentally worships the other great sthalams of the north, like Sri Sailam, like Kedaranatham, all those other north sthalams. He mentally worships and sings padhigams. So we have padhigam of Sambandar for Sri Sailam, for Gokarnam, for Kedarnath. All those things we have Sambandar padhigams. But he didn't physically travel beyond Kalahasti. And then he returns back south, and then he comes to what we call as Chennai today, that region. He comes to Thiruvottriyur, and in Thiruvottriyur he sings padhigams, and then Madras, there is a Mylapore. Some of you would have been to Mylapore, the Kapalishwara temple. So Mylapore in those days was a big port, and there was a rich merchant. His name was Shivanesa, and that rich merchant had a daughter. And when that daughter was growing up, Shivanesa heard about the greatness of thirugnAna Sambandar and wanted to marry his daughter to Sambandar. So he made a decision, like a vow, I will marry my daughter to Sambandar. And probably when she was about 10 years old, when she went into the backyard garden, right? You can imagine those days, the garden, they have all kinds of plants and flowering trees and flowering plants and fruit trees and all that stuff. So she would have, when she went into the garden in the back of their house to do something, maybe pluck flowers or whatever, she gets bitten by a cobra, and the father realizes that she has been bitten by a cobra, and then he calls all the doctors and all the experts and try to save her. The doctors try all kinds of herbs and other things, and he also has the priests and others who are chanting this special mantras and prayer mantras and all those kind of things to protect her. But nothing works, so she dies. And then what to do? She is dead. After 6 hours or 8 hours or 12 hours, you know that she is dead, and what else to do? So he cremates her, and then he takes all the asti, right, the ashes and bones and all that, right, that we collect after the cremation. He takes it and puts it in a pot and says that, this is what the current state of my daughter, and since I made a vow to marry my daughter to Sambandar, this belongs to Sambandar. So he keeps it at home. We normally don't keep the asti at home, right? We keep it somewhere and then we mix it in the ocean or river or whatever, and that's the end of it. But he's keeping it at home in a pot and treating as if she was there, that he has to give that to Sambandar. So this happened, and maybe about 2 years would have gone by now. That's when Sambandar was coming on his pilgrimage to this side of the country. So Sambandar comes to Thiruvottriyur, which is about 20 kilometers north of Mylapore. So Sivaneswar hears about Sambandar's arrival at Thiruvottriyur. Then he sets up a welcoming station on the way from Thiruvottriyur to Mylapore, and then when Sambandar comes to Mylapore, he gives him a grand welcome, and then he brings the so he falls at Sambandar's feet, and then he's expressing his gratitude for his coming to Mylapore and all that. And then his close associates tell Sambandar, this is the background here. He had a daughter who died about 2 years ago, and he wanted to marry her to you, and that's ashes and bones he has kept at home. So Sambandar tells Sivaneswar, bring that pot. So Sivaneswar brings that pot, and Sambandar says, place it outside the temple. So they place it outside the temple, in the main gate of the temple, main door of the temple. They keep it there. And the Sambandar sings one wonderful padhigam. It is 2.47. And Matitta Punnayang Kanal Madamayilai Katittam Kondan Kabali Charamamardan Ottitta Pandvin Urithira Palganatharku Attittal Kanade Podiyo Pumbavai. This is 2.47.1. That padhigam, he sings in every song. He sings, this is the greatness of Mylapore, and without seeing all this, how can you go Pumbavai? Pumbavai is the name of that girl. So he is addressing the song not to Shiva in a sense. He is praying to Shiva, but he is addressing this song saying, "Oh Pumbavai, how can you go without seeing this? How can you go without seeing this? How can you go without seeing this?" So like that he is describing the greatness of Mylapore, the great festivals that take place in Mylapore, and says, how can you go without seeing all this? And by the time the 10th song was sung, the pot breaks, and a beautiful 12-year-old girl stands up from there. Because she died 2 years ago as 10, but now 2 years have gone by, so she is with a 12-year-old girl's body. She is standing there. She falls at Sambandar's feet. Sivaneswar falls at Sambandar's feet. The crowd goes ecstatic. You can imagine the situation there. And then, they're all happy. And then Sivaneswar says, "Oh Sambandar, now that my girl is back to life, as I said, she belongs to you. You must marry her." And at the time, Sambandar says, "Oh Sivaneswar, your daughter was dead and gone. Now this girl is like a daughter to me because Shiva has given her back, and because of my request, because of my prayers. So she is like a girl to me. I cannot marry her. So he declines. So after that, Sambandar spends some time in Mylapore and then goes further on his pilgrimage back to Sirgari. So this girl lived her life in Mylapore without marrying anybody else in the service of Shiva, and then she reaches Shiva's feet at the end. That is her story. So Sambandar comes to Sirgari, and then he stays there for some time, a couple of years. And then Sambandar's parents, right, father Hridayar and mother Bhagavati, they want Sambandar to get married. His perspective is that Sambandar has come to revive the Vedic religion, and in order to perform the yajnas that are mentioned in the Vedas, there are many yajnas that require you to be married. Only a husband and wife together can do those yajnas. So he says, in order to establish the Vedic religion and show the dharma to all the people, he needs to follow it. He needs to get married. Sambandar tries to tell his father, I am not interested in all this worldly life. My mind is only on Shiva. But father keeps explaining his logic that as per the Veda Dharmam, he should marry. So then he meditates on Shiva and feels that this is Shiva's wish. Then he agrees. So they look around, they find a suitable girl about 15-20 kilometers from Sirgari. There is a place called the Nallur Perumanam. So in that place they found a suitable girl, and then they decide on the wedding. So Sambandar invites his friends, right? People, other devotees who he had met in some key places when he was on pilgrimage tours. So some of the nayanmars, right? Like Tirunilnakkar, Muruga nayanar. So some of them, they come to attend his wedding. Thirugnāna is probably somewhere else. So Thirugnāna doesn't come for the wedding. And so they go to Tirunallur Perumanam, which is, as I said, about 15 kilometers from Sirgari. And on the day of wedding, they all assemble and they get married. So Sambandar marries this girl. And then, as the weddings happen in the Tamil-speaking region, the marriage occurs early in the morning. Maybe 7 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, depending upon when they decide as the auspicious time. So the weddings happen in the morning. So after the wedding, his new wife, his family, his friends, whoever as in the guests of the wedding, they all go to the local temple, the local Shiva temple in Tirunallur. And there, Sambandar starts singing a padhigam. Oh Shiva, is it not time for you to take me back? And then this is padhigam 3.125. Kallur Perumanam Venda, Kadumala Pallur Perumanam Pattu Mayyaithula. So that padhigam he sings, and as soon as he finished this padhigam, Shiva appears as there's a huge jyoti that appears in that place, and an entrance to the jyoti also is visible. Sambandar tells all the other guests and family, Shiva has sent this, we are going to Shivalokam, come with me. So all the devotees, all the guests, they enter the Jyoti, and the Sambandar sings one wonderful padhigam, 3.49. That padhigam is known as Namachivaya padhigam. Some other padhigams, there are some padhigams where that Panchaksharam is there. So this padhigam is 3.49. Kadalagi kasindu kannir malgi oduvarthamai nannarikku uipadu vedam naangina meipporulavad nadan namam namachivayave. So in this padhigam, in every song is praising Shiva and the greatness of the holy Panchakshara mantram, and he says that Panchakshara mantram is Namah Shivaya. That's how he sings every song in this padhigam, and basically is this final message to mankind. Every padhigam is giving upadesam, and this is his final upadesam to the mankind, and with that he and his wife go around the Jyoti, and they also enter the Jyoti, and then the Jyoti disappears. With that, Sambandar, his wife, his parents, his relatives, his in-laws, everybody gets to Sivalokam, and that is a wonderful life of thirugnAna Sambandar. So with that, let me pause and see if you have any thoughts or questions or comments on Sambandar's story.
Tiruvattriyur, no?
What is the question?
Temple, no, the Tiruvattriyur temple is also a big kshetram, no? That I think later on Tyagaraja also composed his Tiruvattriyur Pancharatnams, if I am not wrong.
Yeah. Tiruvattriyur is a very major temple. It's in the Chennai region there are several temples, and of the there are many temples, but what I'm saying is there are several temples which have thevaram songs, right? So among those, regardless of it, in Chennai region, let's say within 20 kilometers of Chennai, right? That radius, Tiruvattriyur is the biggest temple in terms of area-wise. And also it is the most important temple because Tirunavukarasar has sung several padhigams there. Sambandar has sung padhigams. Sundarar's life is there's an important event that takes place in Tiruvattriyur in Sundarar's life. So it's a very important place for Sundarar's life. And other saints, right? Patinathar, there is one saint called Patinathar, and he attains mukti in Tiruvattriyur. So Tiruvattriyur is a very major temple, very ancient temple, and very famous temple.
Okay. People go for the 60th birthday. They do the Kalyanam in Tamil Nadu, right? Which temple do they go to? I forgot the name. Is it the same?
Many people go to Thirukkadavur, or it is known as commonly today it's called the Thirukkadayur.
Okay.
And that is where the Kala Samharam took place. That is the reason.
It's near Kumbakonam, is it?
It's near the coast. It is you can say it's about 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers, about let's say 30 kilometers east of Mayiladurai. It's about say 50 kilometers from Kumbakonam.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so it is in that region. So that because people go there because the 60th and 80th birthdays they go there because they want to keep the yama away. So they want to go there so that they think that if they go do that Sashtibda Purti or Satabhishekam there, they will get Shiva's grace and the yama will not come near them. That is a deal that they think. And Mylapore is a very ancient place and a very famous place because the Chennai city is a modern one, right? It came after the British period and British established a fort there and they set it up as a place. So it became a big city only in the last 300 years or so. But before that, Mylapore was the major place in that region. Mylapore was a port, and the Shiva temple that we see in Mylapore, originally that temple was near the coast, and then in the 1600s when the Portuguese came, the Portuguese were fanatics, and they destroyed several temples. They destroyed temples in Goa, they destroyed temples in Sri Lanka, they destroyed temples in other places. So the Mylapore temple in Madras was destroyed by the Portuguese. And that place is where the Santhom Church is standing today.
Right. Correct.
And so this temple, what we see today in Mylapore, that was built about 300-350 years ago by salvaging whatever they could salvage from that destroyed temple and rebuilt it in this new place, new location. So that's the thing about the historical thing about this current Mylapore temple.
Right. Okay.
Good. So now see this. Shiva is also known as Adideva, right? Adiguru. Correct. And today, incidentally, the Guru Purnima, right?
Oh yeah, very true.
So what is the legend, or is it in Siva Puranam something mentioned there, or any of these the Tirumurai or Tiruvachakam, anything is mentioned?
No. So he is the as we say as a Dakshinamurti, right? He is doing Upadesam to the Sanakati years. So that is there, Sanakati years, and also he is the, because everything comes from him, right? He is the Vedas are from him. So he is the one, the matams in south, right? So the Dharmabaramadinam or Thiruvaudirajanam, they typically will say Kailasa Parampara. So from him, they will say, he and his Nandi and all. Later on, we will see that in Thirumandaram, I think we have already seen Tirumoolar's story, right? So in Tirumoolar, he says that, the Shiva, teaches that, and he is Nandi, and Nandi teaches to them, and that parampara is from Shiva. That's how he is Adi Guru.
Okay. So I also came across a story like where Shiva, the Damarukam, he drops down, and then that Nadam creates Vedas. And that one, those Vedas is taken by Vishnu and given to Brahma.
See, the Puranas, there will be different stories, and also sometimes the same event may be described differently in different Puranas.
Right.
So the Puranas typically are there to explain, some concept. So that's why some Puranas will say the same event differently because they want to highlight is different. Right. That kind of thing. So but the bottom line, right? Whether the philosophically everything comes from him. So in Saiva Siddhantam, as the basic things are that there are three things: Pati, Pasu, Pasam. Right? In Advaitam, they say everything is one. Correct. In Dvaitam, they say there are two. God is different, we are different, that kind of thing. And Saiva Siddhantam talks of three things: Pati, Pasu, Pasam. Pati is Lord, Pasu is all the Jivatmas, and Pasam is all the other things. And one important thing they say is that they all three are eternal in that.
Right.
Again, it's all philosophical things, right? We have to they all try to establish these things by different kinds of logic and inference and all that. But bottom line is that they say that they are how can an intelligent being become an unintelligent thing? That kind of approach. So they say that at the beginning of the cycle, this creation dissolution is one cycle, right? And it keeps on going. And at the end of the cycle, everything is absorbed into unmanifested form with the Lord. And then they manifest, and then it happens, and then they exist for a long time, and then they go back. So this goes like a cycle.
Right.
So that's why in Shiva will be referred to in different padhigams or in different places in thevaram Thiruvasakam. Uri Mudalvan. Uri is the final dissolution time, when everything goes back to unmanifested form. And that time he is the only one. And then from him everything comes again. So what they are trying to say, the Vedas, Shiva is the one who sings the Vedas. So that's how Veda Nayagan, Vediyar Nayagan. There is a different song, right? So he is the one. There will be many thevaram songs that refer to as Shiva as the singer of the Vedas. Basically, Vedas come from him.
Right.
And because Vedas come from him, only he can teach the Vedas. I hope that, even though I was giving a long-winded explanation, but I hope that provides that reference or clarification.
Right. Okay. Good. Fine. So we finished a big story now, like.
Yeah. Thirugnāna Sambandar is a wonderful story, and I only touched upon various things. We didn't go. The thevaram is Sambandar. Is such a wonderful saint that at 3 years old he got milk of knowledge from Shiva and Parvati, and by the time he was about 16, that's the age in which in those days people will get married.
Right.
And he got married, and he said, hey, that's enough for me. I have shown the path, right? His father said he needs to get married so that the humankind will see that he showed the dharma, path of Veda Dharma, and he followed it, right? Because it was not just a talk. He actually did. So he got married, but he found the best approach. He got married, but he also said, Shiva, now that I am married, I have shown all these things to the humans. Time for me to come back.
Right.
So he didn't, even though he got married, he didn't live the life of a householder and have kids and do all that. He got married at let's say 8 o'clock in the morning. 11 o'clock in the morning, he has gone to Sivalokam.
Right.
And that final padhigam, wonderful message. That that is going to be your final padhigam, right? He knows that he is going to sing the padhigam, and with this he is going to go to Sivalokam. So in that padhigam, he tries to provide that gist of his message, a simple message. With a pure heart, you chant Panchaksharam, that will destroy all your karma. It will get you to Sivalokam. That is his final message in that padhigam.
Right. We've gone through that, I think.
Yeah, we haven't discussed that, I think. That padhigam, we have discussed the Tunjalam Tunjalada. That is another Panchakshara padhigam.
Yeah, that we did.
Okay. This is another one. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought
so Tunjalam Tunjalada, that is Panchakshara padhigam that he sang when he had his Upanayana, when he had his sacred thread.
Correct. Yes.
So that was an important point in his life. So he sang that. And here is obviously the final point. So here he gives another wonderful Panchakshara padhigam.
Okay.
And Sambandar, he was like a son of Shiva. So whatever he wanted will happen. Remember I mentioned this. There is nothing that Sambandar will ask and there will not be given.
Right.
So Sambandar says, let these palm trees bear fruit. They bear fruit. Sambandar looks at the part of bones and ashes. He says, how can this girl die? She comes back to life. Like that, and then he says, Shiva, is this not time for me to come back? Shiva says, come. Like that. So Sambandar says it happens. That's all.
Right.
So wonderful life, and his songs, there are no songs like this before his time. All these, when you talk of the songs, whether it's music, whether it is poetry, whether it is, everything, there was nothing like this before him.
Right.
All that, there was music, there was poetry, all that existed. But if you look at what he has done, that kind of thing never existed.
Right.
So the rhythmic poetry and with the music and wonderful descriptions, right? We have seen in some of these padhigams.
Correct.
Description of nature. The way he describes the sthalam, the way he describes the temple, or describes the tank or forest or gardens or people. It's amazing. And also the variety that you have got and the volume.
Right.
We have available to us about 383 or 384 padhigams, which is about 4,000 plus songs.
Correct.
Available to us. He must have, he sang thousands of padhigams. This is what is available to us.
Correct. Yes.
So it's an amazing thing. His life is a wonderful life, and the message is so beautiful. And all these things, another beauty is that in his padhigams, he refers historical facts that happened in his life. For example, remember the palm trees, making the male palm trees bear fruit. In the final song, he says, this is the male trees gave fruit. He mentions that in his final song of the padhigam. Or the fact that he put holy ash on the Pandya king's body and cured his fever. He mentions that in the final song of the padhigam. Or the fact that he put the manuscripts in the fire and they will remain unburnt. He mentions that in the padhigam. So all these events, key events, we have internal reference or internal evidence in his padhigams that these were events that happened. Because many times we tend to think, this event did not happen. People just made it up. That's human nature, right? Especially, so in his padhigam he refers to, and not only he refers to that, contemporary Tirunavukarasu refers to some of those events in his padhigams.
Right.
So it's it's a very well documented historical figure.
Correct.
Good.
Yeah. Good. So I think
with that we will conclude this session, and then next session we will continue with the other stories in this Tiruttoṇḍattogai song.
Okay.
Tiruchitrambalam.